Who truly walks through your door, and who do you allow to enter through it? Is it just a friend, a neighbor, a relative, or is it something far older, far darker, hiding behind familiar eyes and ordinary gestures? Most people believe that evil arrives with a warning, a shadow, a scream. But what if it comes in silence, dressed in politeness, dripping with charm, and carrying a smile that was never meant for you? Every home is a mirror of the soul, and yet we open it without discernment, as if the walls we built were strong enough to keep the unconscious out. There are presences that don't just visit, they inhabit, they infect, they rearrange the atmosphere until nothing feels truly yours anymore. Carl Jung warned us, what we fail to make conscious we allow to control us, and sometimes we invite that chaos in with tea and small talk, blind to the invisible hand that begins to dismantle us from the inside. These people, these 6 kinds of people, are not merely toxic. They are archetypal forces, psychological invaders who awaken the worst in you, who feed on your shadow while pretending to soothe it. And the most dangerous part? You know them. You trust them. You may even love them. That's how the trick works. They don't need to break in. You unlock the door, you offer the couch, and then wonder why the air feels heavier, why your peace no longer visits you. Jung spoke often of masks, the personas we wear and the projections we receive. But some masks are not worn to hide, they are worn to hunt. What if the person you keep letting in is the very reason your life feels stuck in a loop you can't explain? What if your depression isn't yours, but something you absorbed from someone who doesn't belong near your dreams? This video is not just a list. It is a mirror, a confrontation, and perhaps a silent exorcism. But it only works if you stay. If you leave too soon, the part of you that needed this most will remain unprotected. You'll recognize them as we speak. But be warned, once seen, they can never be unseen. This is not about judging others. This is about protecting the sanctuary of your psyche. So listen carefully, because somewhere, between these words, is the name of someone you've already let in, and you know it, you felt it. You just haven't dared to face it until now. They never arrive with blood on their hands. They don't knock like intruders or whisper like ghosts. They come as echoes of your past, walking calmly into your home, wearing the face of someone you think you can trust. And you let them in, not because they deserve it, but because something in you is still too afraid to say no. What if that fear was planted? What if the very person who drains your peace is the same one who once made you believe that your boundaries were unkind? Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile, deny, suppress, but we rarely talk about the people who activate it, who bring it to life just by entering the room. You think you're being polite, you think you're being a good host, but your nervous system is already screaming. You just stopped listening long ago. There is a kind of person whose presence twists the energy in your space, even when they say nothing at all. Their silence is not neutral. It hums with criticism, with expectation, with judgment that has no name. They never shout, but somehow you always feel smaller when they're around. Their compliments sting, their help suffocates. You begin to walk differently, laugh differently, think differently, as if their mere presence rearranges the architecture of your being. You don't recognize yourself, but you don't resist either, because you've confused manipulation with love. This is the first danger, the one who hides behind care, who cloaks control in concern. They say, I just want what's best for you, but what they mean is, I want what makes me feel safe and you must conform. And you comply. Not because you are weak, but because a long time ago, someone taught you that love must be earned through self-abandonment. What if I told you that the person who drains you the most is the one you keep defending to everyone else? The one you excuse, justify, protect, even when your body tightens every time they come near. We call them family, a friend, one partner, and yet what they offer is not presence but possession. They don't live with you, they occupy you. Jung would call this a psychic invasion, a colonization of your interior world through the back door of affection. And if you look closely, you'll find that every time they leave, something in you feels missing, like a memory stolen, a truth diluted, a fire dampened. You tidy up the room, but you can't tidy up the feeling. That lingering heaviness is not yours, it never was. It's what they carry. and you unknowingly agreed to hold it for them. There are 6 kinds of people you should never allow into the sacred space of your home, but the first is the one who violates without raising their voice, who reshapes your thoughts without ever touching your body, who never hits but always leaves you bruised in places no mirror can reflect. You think you're the problem. You think you're too sensitive, too reactive, too complicated. But what if your sensitivity is not a flaw but a radar? What if it's the very gift trying to warn you over and over that something is off, that the subtle shifts you feel are not paranoia, they are prophecy? And ignoring them is not compassion, it's spiritual amnesia. The soul remembers what the mind tries to rationalize. You can't logic your way out of energy. You can't love your way out of manipulation. And you can't heal in the same room where the wound is being quietly reopened again and again by someone who pretends not to see the blood. This isn't about blame. This isn't about exile. This is about discernment, the sacred ability to say you cannot enter here, not from a place of hatred, but from a place of remembrance. Remember who you were before you started shrinking. Remember what peace felt like before you began mistaking tension for connection. Because the longer you keep these people close, the more you forget the sound of your own voice. And what Jung tried to show us beneath the theories, beneath the symbols, was that the soul only becomes whole when we stop letting others write our story. There is a silence that corrupts more deeply than any scream. A person who walks into your space and speaks little, but leaves the walls vibrating with something unnamed. Not all invasions happen through force. Some arrive through resonance. A perfectly calibrated presence that syncs with your unhealed wounds and plays them like a piano, left too long in the dark. You don't notice at first. You just laugh less, sleep more, dream less vividly. The air seems thicker. You forget small things. But what's slipping away is not memory, it's vitality. The second kind of danger is subtle. They do not criticize. They drain you. They take the light, the song, the instinct. They absorb your brightness like black velvet absorbs light. And then they call you the dim one. These are not people who argue. They agree, they nod, they empathize. But something in you folds every time they do. They agree with you to disarm you. And you give them access to the very rooms of your soul you've never opened for yourself. You find yourself thinking their thoughts before they speak, adjusting your truth to their comfort, silencing your passion so you don't outshine their fear. These are the ones who fear life in full volume, and so they dim yours. They smile when you suffer quietly. They hug you when you doubt yourself. And when you try to rise, they are the first to hand you your old wounds disguised as concern. Are you sure that's the right path? Isn't that a bit much? I just don't want you to get hurt again. And the part of you that still bleeds listens because you once mistook safety for stillness, because they speak the language of your oldest self, the one that learned to survive by shrinking, adapting, pleasing. And that voice inside you, the one trying to become something greater, is buried once again beneath the rubble of someone else's comfort zone. There is a poison that doesn't burn. It soothes. It calms. It puts you to sleep while dismantling your inner architecture. And the person who brings it often wears the face of sweetness. Jung warned that anything repressed does not die. It simply grows roots in the unconscious. But what happens when it is not you who represses, but someone who cannot bear the light of your transformation? They don't want your destruction. No, that would be too obvious. They want your containment. They want you alive but quiet, present but hesitant, visible but forgettable. You don't notice the exchange until one day you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the reflection. You've become a version of yourself that fits their narrative, a character in their comfort story. And your home, the place where your spirit should breathe freely, becomes a shrine of suppressed potential. The third kind is the one who mirrors your trauma, not your truth. They are magnetized to your wounds like moths to fire, not because they want to heal you, but because your pain validates their own inertia. You talk about healing, they talk about how hard it is. You mention your dreams, they remind you of failure. You share a victory, they change the subject. They don't steal your joy, they neutralize it. And you mistake that numbness for maturity. You start believing that maybe you were naive to hope. Maybe peace is unrealistic. Maybe this dull ache of near connection is all there. It is. But what you're feeling is not realism, it's resignation, and they are the ones who taught you to call it wisdom. What if your evolution was never about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before you were infected with their limitations, before their voice became your internal monologue, before their fear disguised itself as your intuition? The tragedy is not that they entered your home, it's that they rewrote the blueprint. They moved furniture in your soul, they built walls where there should have been windows, and you let them, thinking this was the price of belonging. But true belonging never requires the death of the self. Jung's entire message echoes here. To individuate is not to isolate, but to emerge, to separate what is truly yours from what was projected onto you by others. And so you must ask yourself, who am I when they are not around? Who would I become if their voice no longer echoed in my decisions? What would I choose if I was no longer afraid of outgrowing the people who only loved the smaller version of me? Because evolution has a cost, and often that cost is letting go of those who once felt like home, but now feel like hesitation wrapped in human form. These people do not knock loudly. They enter through sympathy, through history, through wounds. But just because someone knows your past does not mean they deserve access to your becoming. There is a line that must be drawn, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in sacred clarity. A boundary, not of distance, but of identity. Because you are not who you were, and your home must reflect not just your taste, but your truth. There is a particular ache that settles in the chest when a familiar presence enters the room, and your body reacts before your mind can explain why. The fourth kind of danger wears nostalgia, like armor. They remind you of who you were when you didn't know better, and they love you precisely because of that, because your growth threatens their stability, because your healing demands that they confront their stagnation, and so they anchor you in stories you've outgrown. They romanticize your suffering, mock your attempts to change, and call it just being real. But their version of real is resignation with a bitter grin. They remember your old patterns, not to honor your path, but to hold you hostage in your past. And in the name of friendship or family or old love, you silence the part of you that longs to breathe in a new direction. These people are not malicious. That is what makes them so dangerous. They're not villains, they're reflections of who you used to be. And because of that, you defend them. You excuse their dismissiveness. You tolerate the emotional static they bring because you think you owe them something. A debt forged in shared memories, in survival, in broken laughter. But you don't owe anyone your regression. You don't have to climb back into a skin that no longer fits just to make someone else feel less alone. Jung warned us that the past isn't just memory, it's a living force. And if you're not vigilant, it will possess you, not with demons, but with comfort, with repetition, with a script that was never yours to begin with. The fifth kind is even harder to see because you might admire them. They appear powerful, confident, capable. They light up a room. They speak with certainty. And you, still unsure of your own voice, bend toward theirs like a flower desperate for sunlight. But what they offer is not light. It's dominance dressed as guidance. They do not listen, they monitor, they do not share, and they perform. You feel like you're learning from them, evolving through them, growing with them, until one day you realize you've become an echo of their opinions, a mirror for their beliefs, a shadow in their orbit. These are the charismatic manipulators. They're necessarily cruel but consuming. They thrive on control, masked as mentorship, and your reverence becomes the leash around your autonomy. They often arrive during times of confusion, moments when you are still unformed, still unsure. And in that vulnerability, their certainty seduces you. But what they offer is not wisdom, it's architecture, a ready-made structure for your identity. And if you stay too long, you will decorate a house that was never meant to be yours, only to wake up one day wondering why it feels so cold inside. Jung's concept of individuation was born precisely for this, to save us from ourselves and from the personas we adopt in the presence of overpowering energies. You are not here to become someone else's masterpiece. You are here to become whole, even if that means disappointing the ones who expected you to remain incomplete. And then there's the sixth, the most insidious of them all, the one who reflects everything you ever wanted, and yet something always feels off. They agree with your visions, they echo your values, they seem to mirror your soul. But it's not resonance, it's strategy. They study you, they adapt, they infiltrate. These are the shapeshifters of the psyche, the ones who become what you need until you forget you needed anything at all. They don't steal from you, they become you. And the cost is invisible, but devastating. The slow erosion of your inner compass. You begin to doubt your instincts. You second-guess your dreams, because now your reflection smiles back with someone else's face. These are not lovers. They are echoes. They offer emotional mimicry, not intimacy. And their presence in your home feels electric at first, almost too perfect. But perfection is a mask, and the moment you peel it back, the atmosphere shifts. Something in you contracts. And the tragedy is, you miss them even before they leave. Not because of what they gave you, but because of what they mirrored. Back, they made you feel like you had arrived, but in truth they only mirrored the parts of you you still hadn't owned. And once they sense your awakening, they vanish. Or worse, they turn cold. And you're left not with heartbreak, but with identity crisis. These 6 kinds, and the controller, the drainer, the mirror of trauma, the anchor of your past, the seducer of your will, the shapeshifter of your soul, they are not just people. They are initiations. Each one arrives to show you where your boundaries are still porous, where your identity is still in negotiation, where your self-worth still bleeds through the cracks of old wounds. And when they enter your home, your literal or symbolic home, they do not come to take. They come to reveal who you are, what you tolerate, where you are still asleep. And perhaps the most difficult truth is that sometimes the one you must protect your home from is the version of you that keeps inviting them in. You may believe that you're protecting your home with locks and walls, routines and rituals, but protection is not made of wood or steel. It is made of awareness, and awareness demands confrontation. Not of others, but of the parts of you that still cling to the illusion that peace must be polite, that boundaries must be explained, that love means tolerating erosion. These people, these energies, these archetypes, they are not invaders by force. They enter through the fractures you haven't yet named, through the hunger you carry in silence, through the need to be seen, understood, approved, rescued. And the moment they enter, they activate the part of you that still believes you need something outside of yourself to be whole. This is where the real danger lives, not in their presence, but in your permission. There is a corner of your home, perhaps one you haven't visited in a while, where something no longer breathes freely, a space where the air feels stale, where your favorite book remains unopened, where the plant stopped growing months ago. This is not coincidence. Energy lives, energy listens. And when the wrong presence lingers, even for a moment, it can echo into every object, every dream, every choice you make without knowing why. You begin to sabotage your own joy, cancel plans that felt exciting, speak more softly, dress in ways that don't reflect you, and in the stillness of night you feel it, that whispering thought that something in you is slipping away, that perhaps in making room for someone else, you've crowded out your own soul. But you didn't do this out of weakness. You did it because once, long ago, you were taught that to belong you must bend, that to be loved you must host other people's pain. You became a sanctuary for wounds that were never yours. You turned your home into a healing center for those who refused to heal themselves. And perhaps that was noble. Perhaps it gave you a sense of purpose. But purpose built on self-sacrifice is not purpose. It's penance. And you were not born to pay for other people's avoidance. You were born to become. And becoming cannot happen in a space contaminated by emotional parasites wearing the perfume of familiarity. There comes a moment in every life when silence begins to scream, when the patterns repeat one too many times, when the visits end and something in you doesn't miss them. Not really. That is not apathy. That is clarity. That is your soul remembering its original blueprint before you redesigned your identity to accommodate other people's shadows. And in that moment, if you're brave enough to sit in the discomfort, to resist the urge to reinvite the familiar chaos, something begins to rise. Not loudly, not triumphantly, but quietly, like a child emerging from hiding. holding a key you forgot you ever lost. The key to your inner threshold, the one that says, "This is mine, and not everyone is allowed inside." Jung did not promise comfort, he promised integration. And integration requires that you face the parts of yourself that have been complicit in your own imprisonment. The part that said yes when you meant no. The part that stayed silent when you were screaming inside. The part that kept the door open just in case love returned in the form you once recognized. But love that requires self-erasure is not love. It is memory dressed in sentiment. And sentiment is not a reason to surrender your sovereignty. You must reclaim the space, not just the room with your books and blankets, but the space within your psyche, the sacred ground of your attention. Because attention is the altar of your reality. And every person you let too close shapes the gods that rise there. So ask yourself not just who they are, but who you become in their presence. Do you rise or shrink? Do you breathe more fully or hold your breath without realizing? Do you speak in your voice or adjust the frequency to match their comfort? This is the real question. Because the people you allow into your home are not just guests. They are mirrors, teachers, initiators, destroyers, seeds. And you are the soil, the climate, the gatekeeper. Not every seed deserves to grow in you. Not every presence deserves to echo in your walls. And what if this entire message, this entire reflection, was never about them at all? What if every warning, every whisper, every red flag you've ignored was just your deeper self trying to bring you home? Not to the house, not to the room, but to the part of you that remembers how sacred you truly are, the part that no longer confuses empathy with exposure, the part that is finally ready to choose wholeness over history. Because in the end, the most dangerous person you'll ever meet is the one you invite in again and again, even after your soul has already asked them to leave. There are truths that do not scream to be heard. They emerge in whispers, in the quiet between one breath and the next, not to convince, but to remember. And perhaps now, in this moment when the noise has finally settled and the words sear, more than they explain, you can feel it, that this was never about them. Not the six, not the masks, not the names, but about you, about the sacred architecture of your being, and how long you've let others decorate its halls with shadows that were never yours to carry. There is no ceremony for this kind of awakening, no applause, no clear line drawn between before and after. Only a subtle shift in the atmosphere of your soul, like the scent of rain moments before it falls, or the aching silence left behind when a lie is finally buried. The people you once feared to lose are no longer the ones you must keep. The stories you defended no longer feel like home. Something inside you is moving, shedding, cracking open with both terror and tenderness, and in that space, raw and undefended, a question is born. What if the version of me that allows danger in is also the one begging to be set free? You begin to trace back the memories, the rooms where you laughed but felt invisible, the voices that offered comfort while extracting your light, the moments where presence felt more like possession than connection. You see them not with anger but with clarity, and in that clarity something profound begins to dissolve. The spell, the guilt, the old covenant of silence. You realize now your soul has always known. It has always whispered through your unease, your tension, your sudden exhaustion in their company. But you were taught to doubt your inner voice, to defer to the external, to call it love when it was merely familiarity in disguise. Carl Jung did not offer answers, he offered mirrors. And in that mirror, you now see not just reflection, but responsibility. Because protection is not about building walls, it is about refining perception. It is the art of knowing who resonates with your wholeness and who survives on your fragmentation. The home is not just a place, it is a field, a spiritual frequency, a manifestation of your inner ecology. And who you allow into it does not just visit, they echo, they alter timelines, they awaken ghosts. They either nourish your becoming or entangle you in loops that your ancestors have spent lifetimes trying to break. So what do you do now that you see? You don't rush, you don't retaliate, you realign. You begin to choose with reverence, you observe more than you explain. You listen to the tension in your chest before you decode their words. You understand that not every open door is an invitation, and not every knock deserves an answer. There is a temple inside you, ancient, eternal, and only those who come barefoot with eyes that recognize your light without trying to dim it should ever be allowed to sit at its altar. And when you feel the urge to invite back what once felt like home, you pause, not out of fear but out of wisdom, because you finally understand some people do not mean harm, but they carry it. Some wounds speak through laughter, some dangers look like hugs, and some lessons come disguised as guests. But you are no longer a host for what no longer honors you. You are not a container for borrowed chaos. You are not a resting place for unloved parts of others. You are a sovereign field, a conscious threshold, a gate that opens inward, only for what amplifies your becoming. Let this final image stay with you, a single chair in the center of your favorite room, not empty, but expectant, waiting not for another person, but for the version of you who never had space to sit, the one who always made room for others, the one who waited to be chosen. She is arriving now, barefoot, luminous, weathered and wild. And this time, you open the door. You let her in. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is ever the same again. Because in the end, the most sacred decision you will ever make is who you become a home for. If this message stirred something in you, even if you don't yet have words for what it is, let that feeling guide your next step. Comment below what resonated. Share this with someone who needs to hear what you almost didn't let yourself feel. And subscribe to this channel, Archimind, not because of habit, but because you've decided to never again fall asleep to what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. This is not just content, this is a threshold and you just crossed it.